Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. I first want to thank Dr. Rubin for his introduction, and I have to offer an apology because I was late and most people here were not. I wish I had a good rationale to say I was waiting for the people in the back to get in the door, but that's not true. I was just running late, and I'm sorry about that. I'll try to be cognizant of that in the question and answer period. If you came in when I came in, you don't get an extra question. I guess we'll do that. But we're grateful for so many reasons today, and especially to be here at Carnegie Mellon. And the presentation behind me depicts both our past and our future. We're going to talk mostly about the future. Thomas Jefferson said a long time ago that I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past. And I think he was right. I think that's what's motivated all of us. But we'll spend a little bit of time looking back as well. But I did want to thank Dr. Kozlov for kicking us off today and getting our program started. I was met at the coming into the campus by Dr. Bryan, and also, where's Deb? I don't know if Deb got in the room. She's in the back. She was pretty nervous we were late, but Deb, thank you for being with us today. Dr. Rubin, thank you, not only for your presence here today and your introduction, but for your remarkable leadership on some of the issues we're talking about today, and your distinguished scholarship and notoriety on so many of the issues we confront. And I don't profess today to have all the answers. If you have better answers at the end, I hope you come up and correct me. But so many others who are here today from the Carnegie Mellon family, the Steinbrenner family, we're grateful for what we're able to do on a campus and in a facility like this. We'll be talking a little bit about the Hillman Center in a moment. But I did want to also recognize and thank Rich Fitzgerald from County Council, who's here, and we're grateful for your presence, Rich. And the men and women of organized labor are represented in different ways here. Jack Shea, I thought was here. I didn't have a chance. There he is. Jack, thank you for being here today with us. But it's great to be back again in Pittsburgh, and we don't get a chance to do this very often. Some people might think, well, when you're a public official in Pennsylvania, when you happen to be in the U.S. Senate, you're making big, big speeches all the time. It isn't true. We tend to have a lot of opportunities to speak on the Senate floor, and I have on these topics that we'll discuss today and others as well, but we don't get a chance to come back to Pennsylvania and come to a site and give remarks about a major issue like this. So it is rare. Unfortunately, it's rare, but we're grateful that Carnegie Mellon provided me this opportunity. But it's also great to be in Pittsburgh again. I won't go into a lot of stories about growing up in Pennsylvania and spending as much time as I did as a young boy in Pittsburgh, and then coming out here on campaigns and coming out here in so many personal contexts as I have. This is the city that saved my father's life with a heart and liver transplant. I need say very little beyond that for you to understand what's in my heart when I come to this city. And I also am grateful for the way that this city was able to show the world in a lot of different contexts, a lot of different examples, but especially when the world saw this city, this region, and this Commonwealth on display at the G20. Thank you for the work that each and every one of you did to make that successful across this city and across this region. At the time, I guess just prior to the G20, President Obama called Pittsburgh, quote, a bold example of how to create new jobs and businesses while transitioning to a 21st century economy. In a very short sentence, he captured the essence of both Pittsburgh's past and its history and heritage of hard work and sacrifice and innovation, and we could add more words to that. But also, in that one sentence, the President captured the bright promise of tomorrow, the bright promise of Pittsburgh's future and our Commonwealth's future. I'm particularly honored to be here at Carnegie Mellon, that we know is a school that has always been committed to academic excellence. as well as excellence in innovation and ingenuity and new discoveries in moving into the future together. This institution has played a significant role in the transformation of Pittsburgh, in the region, and beyond. And to be here at the Hillman Center for Future Generation Technologies, a leadership in energy and environmental design, so-called LEED. We sometimes use acronyms in Washington. People sometimes ask us what they all mean. For those of you who don't know, I wanted to make sure that we knew that. A LEED certified building, one of the of 8 such buildings on this campus, I'm told. We meet here today, though, not just to talk about our energy future and the wonders of technology and discovery and innovation that we're seeing play out here in Pittsburgh and across the region and across the country, really. But we also meet here at a time of economic trauma. So many families in our Commonwealth and our country are living through an economic nightmare. They've lost their homes or their jobs or both, and in many cases, because of those losses and others, they've lost their hopes and their dreams. We have to recognize that and be cognizant of how difficult this economy is for so many Americans. We're above 10% in unemployment. Some thought we would get there, others hoped we never would, but we have millions and millions of people out of work in America today. In Pennsylvania, it's about 500,000 people. When you look at that in terms of the unemployment rate in our state of about 8.8%, and you compare it to Michigan or some other states where we're almost at half of what they're at. States that have 12 and 14 and 15% unemployment rates. By percentage, in a relative sense, we seem better off. But when you have 500,000 people out of work in a state like ours, it's hard to put that number into any context that makes sense. For so many Americans and so many people across our state, this is a time of real darkness. But in the midst of that darkness, I believe there's no better place to look for the light of inspiration and the light of ideas. No better place than Pittsburgh, southwestern Pennsylvania, and indeed our whole Commonwealth, because there are good things that we can report. But we should not be unmindful of the context of this challenge and not unmindful of the challenges that we face economically. But unfortunately, our challenges are not simply economic. Carbon pollution threatens our future, and I believe threatens human life as well. I was struck by a Time magazine story, and I should have it with me all the time because I've often referred to it. But it's a Time magazine story from about somewhere in 2005 that I found, and someday I'll get the right site. But I know what I read. A long piece about global warming and the effects of it on the world. And there was one sentence in that article that had a profound impact upon me as a public official, but also as a Pennsylvanian and an American. And it was a very brief summary of the challenge that this issue presents as it relates to drought. It said something like, in about 35 years, from about 1970 to 2004, 2005, in that 30-some year period of time, the percent of the Earth's surface that had been the subject of drought doubled in those 35 years. When I read that, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert on drought. I'm not an expert on a number of things number of subjects that would arise from that kind of a statement. But when I read that, I realized, for almost like a moment that we all have in our life when we're analyzing an issue, an epiphany, a discovery, an insight that we didn't have before. I realized that when you double the amount of the Earth's surface that's been subjected to drought, horrific consequences flow from that. When you have more drought, you have you have a failure to have enough water and irrigation to grow crops. That leads to hunger and starvation and darkness and death. That's what I derived from it. And it became, for me, a very important moment in this debate. And unfortunately, we are not just discovering this today. We've known this for a good bit of time. But fortunately, we're starting to address it only in the last couple of years. But for decades, powerful corporate interests have kept us dependent on foreign oil and protected corporations that have polluted the air our children breathe and the water they drink. America's dependence on foreign oil hurts our economy, helps our enemies, and puts our security at risk. Instead of spending $1 billion a day on foreign oil, we should invest that money here. We need energy legislation that puts America back in control, and makes America more energy independent, creating millions of jobs, reducing carbon pollution, and investing in secure, clean energy sources that are made in America and work for America. And I believe that Pennsylvania can play a key part in that future. And to understand that, we need only to look at where we've been and where we are today. A 2002 book about Pennsylvania history. In that book, Dr. Brent Glass, the former executive director of the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, wrote the following, and I quote, "Pennsylvania's central place in the Industrial Revolution is evident in so many places, but perhaps Drake Well, near Titusville, is the most enduring icon of that extraordinary period. The discovery of oil in that Pennsylvania town in 1859 and the commercial exploitation of oil and later natural gas triggered a boom that created tremendous wealth and spectacular failures. An abundance of other natural resources, coal, timber, and iron ore, coupled with the entrepreneurial leadership in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and several other cities, made Pennsylvania an industrial behemoth for more than a century. The legacy of discovery and innovation is evident in the 20th century milestones in research and technology. For example, the polio vaccine, artificial intelligence, and the computer were reached in Pennsylvania's laboratories." Unquote. We know that, for example, that during World War I, Pennsylvania's industrial production was unmatched, absolutely unmatched in the country and maybe the world. Pittsburgh mills turned out 80% of all the steel used by the U.S. Army for arms and ammunition, while mines in southwestern Pennsylvania provided 75% of the coal consumed by munitions manufacturers during the war. So said that same history of Pennsylvania. With seismic change, however, Pennsylvania has endured periods of unprecedented job loss and population declines. Manufacturing jobs, and especially steel, coal, and rail jobs, were impacted by dramatic drops in production. It's another quotation from the history. Quote, "In the Pittsburgh area as a whole, the number of steel workers fell from 90,000 in 1980 to 44,000 in 1984. 4 years, the number of steel workers cut in half in this region. And the history says this very poignantly: wars have caused less economic damage than this." Unquote. The same can be said of population loss. That loss has been staggering in this state, not only in southwestern Pennsylvania, but in places like my home area of northeastern Pennsylvania. Just imagine this, between 1930 and 2000, basically the lifetime of my father, who was born in 1932 and died in 2000, in his lifetime, major cities losing a third or more of their population, 1/3 of their population in about 70 years, included the following cities: Pittsburgh, Altoona, Johnstown, McKeesport, Newcastle, Scranton, my hometown, Wilkes-Barre, and Harrisburg. Among smaller cities, declines of 50% or more occurred in Nanticoke, Shamokin, and Monessen. Nanticoke is right down the road from me. Shamokin's not that far, and Monessen is all the way out here. We know that. The contraction amounted to 60% population loss in Duquesne and Ambridge, and 70% population loss in Homestead. A lot of those numbers we know, or some of them we know, but it's important to put that into context. The economic devastation that we've seen throughout our history, throughout our state. Pennsylvania's industrial might and substantial extraction and use of natural resources cause significant environmental damage at the same time. So even as we lost our industrial strength over time, we were also causing tremendous environmental damage. And the battle, and maybe that's not the strongest word we can use, the battle to preserve our environment was and has been and continues to be a tough battle for decades against very powerful interests. It was not until 1950 that state law required communities along the Susquehanna River to build sewage treatment plants instead of pumping millions of gallons of raw sewage into the river. That same history I referred to says, and I quote, "By the 1960s, pollution was causing catastrophic fish kills in rivers." We know that sportsmen in Pennsylvania are witnesses to the degradation of our natural environment here in Penn's Woods across our state. A few years ago, it was reported that the ice fishing season is 3 weeks shorter than it was just 2 decades ago. And trout fishermen fear that global warming will reduce further the number of streams that can provide cool waters that trout need to survive in. In 1965, not that long ago, 1965, the Clean Streams Law was passed, and in 1971, the state constitution was amended to reflect the Commonwealth's commitment to preserving God's creation. Here's what Article 1, Section 27 says in the Pennsylvania State Constitution. The people shall have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustees, an important word, as trustees of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. That's what our state constitution charges us with doing as Pennsylvanians. So our past is instructive as we work to invent the future, a future in which we must rise to the challenge of climate change and putting America back in control of its own energy instead of continuing our dependence on foreign energy, which hurts our economy, helps our enemies, and puts our security at risk. So the message of Pennsylvania history is clear in a number of ways, but it's certainly clear in this way as well. That old expression, been there, done that. We've done this before. We know how to create jobs in Pennsylvania. We know how to innovate and change. We know how to adapt. So been there, done that, but this time even better than we did in the decades and even in the previous century. But also, we need to do this in a different way, with a better understanding of our responsibility to future generations. So the opportunity to do it is here again, and I believe the future is now. President Obama, as our new president, has set us on a course to mitigate the impacts of global warming pollution and to make investments that will help allow us, to become exporters of clean energy. In the United States Senate, Senator John Kerry, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Barbara Boxer, chairwoman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, have introduced their climate bill, Senate Bill 1733, the Clean Energy Jobs in America Power Act, that is an effort toward bringing the President's goal to reality. I share the President's vision for our clean energy future. At the same time, I want to make sure that whatever solutions we reach is good for America and for Pennsylvania. We have already begun taking steps toward our goal. After opposition by Republicans in the Senate, we enacted, the Congress enacted, as part of the Emergency Economic Stabilization Bill. Some call it the TARP bill. I'm using the formal name. The Emergency Economic Stabilization Bill last year, we enacted an extension of tax incentives for businesses to invest in power generated from the wind, the sun, geothermal, and other sources of clean, renewable energy. Now that went by a lot of people because it was the so-called bailout bill. Well, a lot of people didn't realize that unless we attach those tax incentives or the extension of those tax incentives, it never would have happened because of Republican opposition to that set of incentives over, at least in the time I was in the Senate up to that point in time, a year and a half, if not longer, of opposition. So for those who didn't like the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, you should be real happy that those tax extenders got in there for the kind of renewable sources of energy. And without that, it would be very hard to incentivize what's been happening here in Pennsylvania and across the country. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, so the so-called stimulus bill, earlier this year includes over $80 billion in investments in clean energy to jumpstart the effort to create clean energy jobs and also to help our economy. That bill included tax incentives for clean energy manufacturers and for small businesses and families to invest in energy efficiency. And already, $455 million has been set aside for Pennsylvania to promote energy independence, and another $233 million was recently announced to create a more efficient and reliable electrical grid, our electrical grid system here in Pennsylvania. I work to secure appropriation funding for clean energy programs and infrastructure in Pennsylvania to create jobs and save consumers money through increased efficiency in fiscal year 2010. I secured nearly $1.5 million for the Ben Franklin Technology Partners Clean Energy Commercialization Initiative designed to advance clean alternative energy technology development and commercialization. In fiscal year 2010, I worked with Congressman Jason Altmaier to have $1.2 million appropriated for PPG Industries for low-cost manufacturing research and development for solar cells and windows. Now, taking advantage of the well-trained, dedicated, skilled workforce and entrepreneurial spirit that has grown out of our industrial past and is still with us today, Pennsylvania has fast become a leader in clean and renewable energy. This includes homegrown companies like Aztec Solar Power in Philadelphia, which is building solar energy systems for residential and commercial buildings and creating over 100 new jobs at a future manufacturing site in York, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has also attracted investment from around the globe. The Spanish wind energy company, Gamesa Energy, established its U.S. headquarters in a manufacturing facility outside of Philadelphia, more recently opening up a windmill blade factory, creating hundreds of jobs. Iberdrola Renewables, a world leader in clean energy technology, established its East Coast headquarters in Radnor, Pennsylvania, with more than 60 employees, and built 3 wind farms in Somerset, Schuylkill, and Columbia counties, right across the western to middle of our state, producing more than 1,500 construction jobs. This past summer, the Pittsburgh International Airport kicked off a project to convert nearly 1,500 light fixtures into energy-saving LED lighting, teaming with Appalachian lighting systems of Elwood City here in Lawrence County, which is on the cutting edge of lighting technology, and the lighting will use 83% less energy and save county taxpayers $158,000 per year. And just yesterday, I was handed a report that talked about southeastern Pennsylvania, but in particular was highlighting some of the success stories that we have in Pennsylvania. This one example, Windle Mechanical Solutions, has found that the small components they manufacture can be used in the design of emerging industries such as wind turbines. They have expanded their business into this field and hope to build their company from 8 to 50 employees. And so there's much to celebrate, but also much to celebrate right here at CMU. Scientists and engineers here are sparking clean energy innovation. CMU researchers are working with the University of Pittsburgh, Penn State, West Virginia, and Virginia Tech on ways that CO2 can be safely and economically captured, transported, and sequestered in deep geological formations. Through partnerships with the auto industry, CMU's engineers are helping to design more fuel-efficient cars and working to find the best use for biofuels. The university has also spun off a company called Plextronics that specializes in printed organic solar technology and energy-efficient lighting. Plextronics is one of the fastest-growing companies in the city, increasing the size of its workforce from 4 employees in 2002 to 65 employees in 2009. Good news there. The company was named a 2009 Going Green East 50 private company by Always On, and one of the best places to work in Pennsylvania in 2008. We'll do some other CMU examples later. So just a few examples of the enormous potential for clean energy jobs in Pennsylvania. According to a report from the Pew Charitable Trust, Pennsylvania, some people wouldn't have said this a couple of years ago, Pennsylvania ranked 3rd in the nation in clean energy jobs. How many times have you heard that? Not many. I'll say it again for the presses here. Pennsylvania ranks 3rd in the nation for clean energy jobs. Not so says Casey, but so says the Pew Charitable Trust. With 10,000 clean energy jobs and another 25,000 jobs in conservation and pollution mitigation technology. If we set the right course, all of this good news, and I could go to every seat here and you could tell me something else that's good news, but if we set the right course, all of this good news can be just the beginning. A recent report released by the Pennsylvania Business Leaders for a Clean Energy Economy suggests that clean energy and climate legislation could create up to 78,000 jobs in Pennsylvania while increasing real household income by $1,092 and could grow the state economy by $4.3 billion. So says the Pennsylvania Business Leaders for a Clean Energy Economy. The potential is enormous. Listen to what John Doerr. Now, if you know anything about venture capital, and I know people that do, don't profess to know, but John Doerr still is recognized as maybe the greatest, or at least one of the greatest venture capitalists of his generation. His investments helped launch companies like Google and Amazon, and we've heard of them. But John Doerr believes that the opportunities for clean energy technology are bigger than for information technology. He calls energy the, quote, mother of all markets, unquote, and, quote, perhaps the largest economic opportunity of the 21st century, unquote. So what we need is an energy bill that limits pollution and greenhouse gas emissions and invests in clean energy that is produced right here in America. It must include mandatory and achievable limits on carbon emissions. It must include incentives for greater energy efficiency by businesses, government, and families. It must include investments in clean, renewable energy sources like wind, solar, and advanced batteries. It must also include a pathway for cleaner coal. Our state is ranked 5th in coal production, and coal provides about 53% of our electricity in Pennsylvania. Moreover, the reliability and reasonable cost of coal-based electricity is critical to the energy-intensive industries in our state like steel, cement, pulp, and paper, as well as glass, and to Pennsylvanians who must balance their household budgets. So we need to keep coal in our energy mix, but in a manner that reduces pollution through carbon capture and storage, so-called CCS technology. I've worked with senators from coal states to recommend ways to accelerate the demonstration and deployment of carbon capture and storage technology. I've also introduced legislation to increase funding for clean coal research, development, and demonstration, with much of that R&D being conducted just down the road at the U.S. Department of Energy's National Energy Technology Laboratory in South Park, Pennsylvania, a place I visited a number of months ago and was very impressed by the work they're doing. And along with Senator Mike Enzi, a Republican of Wyoming, I introduced Senate Bill 1502, the Carbon Storage Stewardship Trust Fund Act of 2009, that will help ensure the safety and long-term stewardship of storing carbon dioxide in geological formations. Technology has become available to allow access to a vast natural gas reserve that underlies a large portion of our state, and that's known as, and everyone knows about this now, the Marcellus Shale Formation. It's estimated that this formation could supply up to 100 years of natural gas for the nation. And with more than 1/3 of Pennsylvania's electricity coming from nuclear power plants, we must examine the role of nuclear energy in our clean energy future. Here in the Pittsburgh region, nuclear energy companies like Westinghouse, Curtiss-Wright Flow Control, and Haltech have created close to 1,600 new jobs. As we can all see from some of the information I just reviewed, Pennsylvania has a long history of developing energy resources and also using those resources to spur industrial growth and create jobs. I believe a clean energy bill also must take into account the challenge in transitioning energy-intensive industries to clean energy. I'm optimistic that we can do this in a way that protects workers and creates new manufacturing jobs. While the long-term impact of clean energy will be positive for jobs and economic opportunity, we must work to minimize the short-term disruption and impact on workers, businesses, and communities. Moving to a clean energy economy will be difficult, and it will be a challenge for industries like the steel industry in terms of reducing pollution and increasing energy efficiency. But our steel industry and our steel workers have already begun to meet that challenge. For example, U.S. Steel's Mon Valley Works, that plant recently identified an opportunity to capture coke oven gas and use it as a fuel for a blast furnace, reducing emissions and saving the company millions of dollars a year. Towns and communities throughout the state depend upon good-paying jobs created by our steel industry and by pulp and paper mills, limestone kilns, petroleum refineries, glass factories, and chemical plants. I'm working in the Senate to ensure that these industries have sufficient time to make the transition by providing them adequate emission allowances. I'm also working to put in place provisions to protect against the loss of jobs and markets to countries that do not comply with international agreements to reduce greenhouse gases. We must have strategies in place right now to build a bridge for our workers and our communities as we move to a clean energy economy. I recently introduced Senate Bill 2742, the American Worker and Community Assistance Act. This legislation will help workers affected by pollution reduction legislation. The bill provides job training assistance, wage replacement, and health benefits to workers in energy-intensive industries. The bill also enables communities, not just individuals, but communities, to obtain grants to develop comprehensive strategic plans for community redevelopment, economic adjustment, diversification of employment opportunities, environmental remediation projects, and public infrastructure construction projects. If we craft the right energy bill, we can take control of our nation's economic energy and our nation's security while mitigating the impact on our workers and our businesses. And we have little choice but to do so. The threat of climate change to our national security is real enough that we now know that our government is currently assessing the readiness of our military to to protect us and keep the peace should global warming continue unchecked. As the chairman of the Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Near Eastern and South and Central Asian Affairs, which includes all the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Iran, Iraq, and I won't mention all the countries, but I happen to be chairman of that subcommittee, and I know that the scarcity of water in that region meaning particularly Pakistan, but also India and Afghanistan as well, that water scarcity is a major, major challenge. These countries greatly depend upon the Indus River that is fed by the Himalayan glacier to supply their drinking water and the water they need for agriculture and industry. Global warming is causing that glacier to melt and disappear. Once the glacier is gone, the Indus River is expected to lose 30 to 40% of its water flow. Pakistan especially, but also Afghanistan, are already water-stressed countries that rely heavily on the Indus River. I don't think I have to explain to anybody the national security implications in this already unstable region of the world in terms of not having enough drinking water or water to grow food. Nor do I need to explain to anyone the risk that that continues, I should say, in relying upon unstable countries and regimes for foreign oil. Inaction will also threaten our economic security and our competitiveness around the world. Already China leads the world, unfortunately, leads the world in wind turbine production using technologies that were developed right here in America. So we developed the technology, and now they're making the product that we need. We've also developed, this country also developed the first solar energy technologies, but Japan, China, and Germany are now moving ahead in manufacturing solar panels. According to John Doerr, I spoke of earlier, only 6 of the top 30 countries in solar, wind, and advanced batteries are American firms. Just 6 of the top 30 countries, or companies, I should say. If we allow this to continue, we will simply repeat past mistakes and sacrifice our best chance to keep American jobs here and to create new industries here. I believe that by choosing the right path, America will regain control and reclaim its competitive edge, restore its energy independence, and create a new economic engine that will drive our economy through the 21st century. We need not look any further than Pittsburgh for a shining example of how an economy can transform itself. I believe we should not and must not pick winners and losers in this type of energy as we pursue efforts to reduce pollution. Renewable energy, energy efficiency, clean coal, nuclear, and natural gas all have an important role to play in shifting to a lower carbon economy. We have the opportunity to make pollution reduction work for American communities and workers. We have the opportunity to build a strong bridge to energy and national security. We have the opportunity to get our control back of the American economy, our security, and our energy future. But it's time that the Congress moves forward with responsible legislation that will reduce carbon pollution and invest in clean energy technology to expand our nation's manufacturing and industrial base and create a new generation of job opportunities. And it's also time that Pennsylvania, a place where the skill of our workers and the ingenuity and innovation of our new clean energy businesses will help lead America's next great economic revolution. I believe all of this is a challenge worthy of a great commonwealth and a great nation. Thank you very much.